There's only one person in the audience. Oh my God, this is going to be such a
Okay, welcome everyone. It's just after 7:15, so we'll open tonight's special meeting of electors. So just first of all, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. So we know that the town of Bassendean was founded on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people, always was and always will be. My name's Renee McLennan. For anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Mayor of the town of Bassendean, and thank you for being here and giving up your evening to participate tonight. So as you hopefully are all aware, tonight is a special meeting of electors. Special meetings of electors are prescribed under section 5.28 of the Local Government Act of 1995. In this instance, Mr Terry Blanchard, who's seated here, has collected the required number of signatures to request tonight's special electors meeting, with the purpose being to discuss parking restrictions, addressing issues with football parking and special events at Bassendean Oval, and to offer other options for council to consider, which weren't contained within the officer's report, which was brought to the June 22nd meeting this year. So just by way of background, at that June meeting, the report was presented to council. No decision was made about football and special events parking around the Oval at the time. Council instead deferred the item, requesting that the administration undertake further investigation and provide a new report on these investigations and any other means to improve parking functionality in the vicinity surrounding the Bassendean Oval. So this requested report is to be provided to council within 6 months' time. Mr Gibson, our Director of Community Planning, will provide some more detail on this shortly. Just before we move on though, I'd just like to go through a little bit of the meeting procedure for tonight. So hopefully if you've had a chance to have a look at the agenda, the first few pages of the agenda highlight the procedure that will be undertaken, and that's just really to help us have a meeting that runs smoothly this evening. If you haven't already, can I request that you not only sign in for the record of attendance for the meeting, but also through the Safe WA app. Discussion at special electors meetings only relates to the specified purpose for the meeting, so that being what I just said, in this consideration being the parking for football and special events around the Bassendean Oval area. So up on the projector, we've got the area that was in question and included in the officer's report that council considered in June. So we ask that when the opportunity during the meeting to either give a deputation, to ask questions, statements or move motions comes up, that it directly relates to the specific purpose for this evening's meeting. So unfortunately tonight other topics can't be considered, but you're very welcome to come back to the next council meeting if you have questions outside the scope of tonight's meeting, or of course any of your councillors and the town staff are always willing to be in communication if you've got any other concerns. So I've introduced myself, just so everyone aware who else is in the room. We've got Councillor Kath Hamilton, who's the Deputy Mayor. We've got Councillor Hilary McWilliam and Councillor Chris Barty. Councillor Sarah Quinton and Councillor Jai Wilson aren't here this evening. To my right, I've got our CEO, Peter Mabs, and then the town's executive. So we've got Mr Paul White, who's the Director of Corporate Services, Mr Luke Gibson, who is the Director of Community Planning, who will address us soon, Mr Phil Adams, who is the Executive Manager of Infrastructure, and Ms Donna Shaw, who is the Manager of Development in Place. I always want to say Planning in Place, I'm sorry. And then we have our Governance Officer, Libby Kania, and our Minute Taker, Amy Holmes. So that's everybody who's in the room. Are there any declarations before we begin from councillors on tonight's agenda? Okay, so we'll move on to item 5.1, which is just in advance of Mr Blanchard giving his presentation. So we'll just ask Mr Gibson.
Just one point, item 2, which is apologies. You didn't have item 2, apologies.
Okay, what apology would you like to give, Mr Yates?
Laurie Saint of West Road.
Yeah, we've received those apologies, thank you.
Madam Chair, is Mr Gibson an elector of the town of Bassendean?
Mr Gibson is our Director
Sorry?
of Community Planning.
Is he an elected?
No, he's not, but Mr
Then he
Blanchard.
doesn't have a right
Mr
to
Mr Blanchard, I am running the meeting and I have gone over the agenda with you prior to tonight, and we did say that we provide some background so that everybody in the room had an understanding of what was included in the officer report, so they had context for tonight's
So
meeting.
he will present the report from 12.6.
Mr Blanchard, he will speak to the item and then you will be given the opportunity to give your presentation to the
Because
room.
He's
Mr.
not elected
Blanchard?
and he cannot speak. at
Mr
this
Blanchard, Mr Gibson, would you like to just provide the background information?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A lot of, you've covered broad history of it, but I'll go through it again in a bit more detail. So as Madam Mayor suggested, Council considered a report that discussed potential changes to car parking restrictions generally around Bassendean Oval. That was in June this year. The report was prepared after the town had undertaken a public consultation on a series of potential changes, broadly being the replacement of the signed parking restrictions with yellow painted lines on one side of a number of roads, which provide a no stopping restriction at all times. The report to Council in June recommended the provision of yellow lines for the broader area, with the exception of Devon Road, where the local community wanted some level of restriction but did not support the yellow lines. In that location and in response to the community feedback, it was recommended that the signage remain, but the particulars of the signed restrictions be amended so as to prohibit parking on weekends throughout the whole year. Council was made aware of that at that time, that it was open to accept the staff recommendation, or alternatively make a different change to the restrictions or make no change at all. In the end, as Madam Mayor suggested, Council resolved to defer consideration of the matter to allow staff to investigate a number of issues related to parking and traffic matters generally. The deferral also required staff to bring a report back to Council effectively by the end of the year. Staff are currently working on the matters contained within the deferral, and it's expected a report will be brought back to Council in November or December.
Great, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 6, which is deputation. So Mr Blanchard, this is your opportunity to present to the electors. Now I believe you didn't have a PowerPoint, but you wanted to speak to that. Did you want to speak at the microphone or at the table?
I think everybody can hear me here, so I'll come to the table. But first of all, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the 10-minute deputation period be moved to 20 at this stage. My presentation will take a little longer than 10 minutes, but hopefully nowhere near the 20. But there may be other people on the floor at this electors meeting who may want to make their own presentation, and I'd like to ask for a seconder on that motion to extend the deputation from 10 minutes to 20.
Okay, so Mr Blanchard's moved to extend it. Is there a seconder?
Sorry, my address is 5 Devon Road.
Thank you. Yes?
Happy to do so. Paul Polifka of 193 West Road.
And can I just see by a show of hands those who are in support of that? So that is carried. Thank you. All right, Mr Blanchard, I'll put the timer on so we know how we're going. So you've got 20 minutes there, and if you exceed that time, then we can deal with it when it arises.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the ratepayers or electors who are here, the reason I went out and got the 100 signatures to hold this meeting is that a 10-minute deputation with, let's say there's 20 people from the area here tonight, you all want to have a say, you're not going to do it in 10 minutes. So, in an electors meeting, there is an opportunity for people to speak once, let others talk, and when that's exhausted, you can have another speech or question or whatever at the end, and that's the way the Local Government Act lays it out. So the reason I did that, some of my neighbours, and I'm at 5 Devon Road, and if anybody knows Devon Road, I'm not even in this particular parking restriction. I'm on the south side. But my residents on the north said, look, we're not happy with this, what do we do? So to go to the report, we said that we would offer some new parking restrictions. Well, when you go into this issue, as a retired engineer, I'm not going to waste my time, because when you get the information that I think should have been in that report, I think you'll see why. One of the issues that they say is traffic safety. I've been into the Main Roads website, which I'm allowed to do, and intersection accidents. There's 3 right angle accidents at North Road and Guildford Road on a Monday, Friday and Wednesday. Got absolutely nothing to do with football. Old West Road at the roundabout, there are 2 accidents. One on a Wednesday and one on a Saturday. The Wednesday one's a rear ender and the Saturday one is where somebody hit an object. That is, they hit the island, a power pole or whatever. That has nothing to do with parking for football. So as far as those accidents go, mid-block, North Road, there was one just south of Guildford Road. They hit an object on a Thursday. Nothing to do with football. Briggs Street had one on a Friday when somebody was parking and just about ended up in the POS on the corner. Again, nothing to do with football parking. Railway Parade near 5th Avenue, there was no information given, it just said it was on a Monday. So I'm saying, okay, maybe that was a long weekend and the football traffic was causing a problem. I then looked at the traffic volumes. I sent a spreadsheet into the city. No criticism intended, but I didn't get it back. But the Main Road said that the access streets, which most of those streets are, can have up to 3,000 vehicles a day. So I used the planning criteria, the large one from years ago, 10 trips per day per house. Not one street got anywhere near. The maximum was West Road with 1,200. There was none around 3,000. And I'll tell you now, having been a traffic engineer, 3,000 vehicles a day you don't want to live on. You need to cut it off at about 1,500. I don't have the traffic speeds, but I'll say this, that the local authority was good enough to give me Devon Road at 53.4 k per hour. Now that's well within 10% of the 50 k per hour in an access street. So there's not a problem there. Through traffic, nobody's done origin destination studies in these streets, so we can't even talk about that. My first reaction was the Public Transport Authority are going, whoa, the buses. No, the buses come back and said they don't have a problem with Devon Road. So based on that, there's no traffic safety problem. But that report says to council, we are telling you there's a traffic safety problem here. There's not. There are facts and figures that show there isn't. Residents can park on their verge, that's a good one. We can do that now. You don't need to take away the parking on the road. But then there's the resident who looks after his lawn for the city, it saves you money, etc. And he doesn't want parking on his verge. So why should he be given the option of, oh, we'll take you off the road, but you can park on the bloke's verge? That's just not on. And one, Madam Mayor, I'm sorry, I am going to mention it. And you asked me at one stage in a little meeting not to. In this report it says there were restrictions placed on the east side of North Road between Guildford Road and house number 19. It says there that the change of the type of parking was changed in 2019. I spoke to a long-serving councillor who's not here tonight, and he said, oh, there was another report must have come up. Because guess what? If you go out to that section of North Road, there's no parking restriction there. It's not there. There's no lines, there's no signs. It's not there. Now, we can look at it in 2 ways and say, look, the administration failed to implement a council resolution. I'm not into that. All I'm saying is I think the further report probably came, they killed the parking restriction, but then the report that we had in June didn't mention the last report that killed and then they recommended we'll have that parking restriction again. This is going around in a circle and there's a problem there that needs to be looking into.
I'm just going to interrupt you just for a moment, Mr.
Yes.
Blanchard. When we spoke, what I did ask you to be mindful of
yes.
was providing options and alternatives and input, but
Yep.
not denigrating our staff's work. So I will remind you of that again.
Yep, that's not a problem. no stopping parking restriction, what does it really mean? Now, that's fine. It means no stopping. And yes, we've had public comment. It's all right, we won't give them a ticket, we'll educate them. What, on a restriction that shouldn't be there in the first place, and I'll prove that later on. But then somebody said, oh, but they might need education for the football parking. Well, that's great. How about you go and educate the football parkers and so on? That is so severe. And then some of the words in the report, and I'm on the report, not the people. Clutter in the streets. That's a good one. That's your cars, that's your friends' cars, that's your family's cars. They're the clutter. And then, but have a look at the yellow lines. If you've got a bunch of young blokes out there tonight and they're painting yellow lines up your curb lines, you're going to hit them with graffiti. This is a form of formal graffiti, these yellow lines. And I did say at the deputation before, the Institute of Public Works Engineers, through guys like me, went to Europe and brought this system back, analysed it and said, we're not going to put it in. One, street lighting. And don't tell me you're going to say all the street lights in our area are fantastic. They're not. They're not up to scratch. What happens when it rains? The water runs in the gutter and you can't see the yellow line. And then I couldn't resist. I walked out of round the corner the other day where there is a yellow line on the corner of Brooks, and you don't sweep your streets well enough. Have a look at that. Can you see the yellow line? Look at the debris on top of the yellow line. If that happens and you try giving me a ticket, you can come to court with me, because I'm going to get my lawyer and we're going to hit you for costs and everything else. That's just not on. You just can't do that. Anyway, so there are a few of the things. And when you look at no stopping, it is generally transport routes. Guildford Road's got it. Why? 40-odd thousand vehicles a day, and you don't want people stopping every 5 minutes and banking up the traffic. That's not how it works. No stopping is not for residential streets. You need to put in no parking where people can stop for a few minutes, deliver a present or a child or whatever into a house and move on. They can't park there for all the afternoon, but 5 minutes here and there, then I would say, yeah, just don't give people tickets for that. So that's the no stopping. If you look at extension of the existing parking facilities, if I can go with the men's football for a starter, which is on Saturdays, I'm one of the nutcases that follow Swan districts, have done for decades. The early 80s and the mid 80s, when Swans were flying high and winning 3 premierships and so on, West Perth was their major combatant. I've been to Bassendean Oval with over 18,000 people there. On the 19th of June this year, West Perth, and I happened to be out in the street counting how many things I had to get, there was 2,904 spectators turned up. And that's official from the waffle. 1/6, and you want to extend the parking restrictions because, whoa, we've got a problem. That's very interesting. And you want to put it at night and all the rest of it. Now let's have a look at the ladies, because this is the big one. You know, we need a parking restriction on Sunday. The report did not say how many women's games were played on Bassendean Oval this year. They are 100% correct. They did play in February on the 21st. That's a home game. The next home game was the 21st of March. And the next home game was the 9th of May. So in the home and away season, on Sunday, the ladies at Swan Districts played 3 times. And you want to implement a new parking restriction. You've got to be joking, because I can tell you now, on the 29th of May, and I'll comment on this a bit later, women, men, Colts, reserves on a Saturday all played at home, and there was just over 1,000 spectators. Not 18,000, 1,000. The ladies got into the finals and they were able to have 2 finals. Guess who was the idiot walking around the streets those days? Me. The 20th of June, which was after the 19th when West Perth played there, and I'll just show the public. One of the ladies said to me, and I'll sign stat decks on these. One of the ladies yelled out, "For God's sake, take some photos." That's Devon Road between around 3:30 in the afternoon. Not one car parked legally or illegally for the whole day. I was flabbergasted. So on those 2 days, I'm out there looking at how I'm going to collect signatures on the 20th of June and the 27th. And if you'd have fired a cannon up the street, the only person going to die, me. There was nobody else, there was hardly any cars parked, and so on. So the effect of having Sunday parking as opposed to Saturday parking, the different events that can happen on a Sunday, when you might have a Sunday lunch. And I had one lady tell me she'd never invite her mother over for Sunday lunch on Mother's Day. And I thought, gee, nice family. But Mother's Day, Father's Day, kids do Easter Sunday, Easter egg hunts. What happens if Christmas Day falls on a Sunday? Oh, that's right. You people won't have a ranger on duty. Still doesn't matter, the law's still there. Possible Boxing Day, New Year's Day. This goes on and on. Children's and adult functions at their houses don't need to have a no stopping line outside their house. And look, I'll give credit to the town, the way it's done its parking signs. If you've got an area of parking, they put one each end and they put maybe 1 or 2 in the middle. I can take you to councils in the suburbs where they put them every 4 houses. It looks like a picket fence. And that's why I asked when our guys went to Europe, can you please tell us how they do their parking? And I did say, and there was a gentleman whose daughter has lived in London for 13 years. They don't do it in England anymore. They cut it out because of debris, lights and so on. Parking sign costs, or the extension of the parking restrictions, tonight. After 6 o'clock on a Saturday night, why have we got a parking restriction in people's streets? It's not revenue raising, is it? Because if it is, I'll be out there making sure people move on and so on. But I don't believe Town of Bassendean's after that. That's not what it's about. There's absolutely no reason to have a parking restriction after the football people go home. Get on with it. Let people live. Then you have the special events. I've been here nearly 25 years next month. 2 sound waves and a Rolf Harris concert that I can recall. And trust me, there was cars and people everywhere. And this town put in temporary parking restrictions. And after the event went on the following day, you picked up the parking restrictions and we all went back to living. We didn't need a restriction 12 months of the year, 24 hours a day, with a yellow line painted down the road. You can do that again. And yes, it costs the town. Well, you have to approve the event. One of the conditions of that event is, Mr. Promoter, I think there was a lady sitting here, and I said, if you're running it, it costs us $5,000 to do that. Guess what you got? One of your conditions is that you at least pay or share the payment of the temporary parking restrictions. And you'll probably believe it because that's who I am. It says here the costs. You know, it's going to cost $800 per annum to look after the signs. Is roughly taking out a lot of the units. There's roughly 60 properties in Devon Road just alone. They pay about $2,500 rates per year. Rubbish, levies and so on leaves about $1,500 to go into general revenue. Not bitching about that, that's fine. But if it's 60 houses, we just put 90 grand into your budget, and if you take 1% of that budget, it's $900, and that's right, it covers the $800 that you're going to have to do to look after the signs. I'm just flabbergasted. The other thing that with the yellow line, and you've seen the photo there, if you look at your street sweeper and he goes down, to keep those yellow lines right, even in summer, there's leaves and everything else, he's probably going to have to sweep 6 times a year, every 2 months. They use steel or very heavy brushes doing the curb line. So what's it going to do to your yellow line over a 2-year period? It's going to take it out. It's only paint. And if it take it out, that's right, it costs $7,000 to put it in. So every 2 years, I could argue, you're up for an extra $7,000 instead of $1,600, 2 times 800. This is not an economic thing. This gives you a problem. Dear oh dear. Nearly finished, Madam Chair. The business of the streets and parking outside I've covered. Who owns the streets? Town of Bassendean. Under the Act it says care, control and management of the streets. Why? To upgrade, to carry out infrastructure improvements and to maintain. But who owns the streets? The residents either side own the streets. They live there. And they live there 24 hours a day, Madam Chair. And the recommendations of that report is that you're going to come out with an absolute, what I call draconian measure and put yellow lines. When you put those yellow lines down, I'm going to argue that, and we did it in Devon Road, the ambience and the environmental aesthetics of those streets is ripped to pieces. You don't need that. And as I said, the other thing that I did do, there are 33 signs out there. And the report that I will give you, probably in the next couple of days when I put some stuff in, there's the audit report on your signs. And if you're telling me to fix those signs is going to cost $3,000 odd, there are 3 faded signs out there. That's all. And I've got the photos to prove it. There is 1 sign leaning on the corner of Brooks, which you need to straighten up, and I think 2 blokes could walk out there and push it up and tamp the soil down. There's 2 bent signs where the corners have been done. 5 signs and 1 thing, and you want $3,500 nearly to fix it? You better get another contractor who's supplying your signs and poles, because that's way over the top. The audit is there. I'm happy to supply it all. All of what I'm talking about is all in a report, and so on, but based on traffic safety, the requirements of, that's the thing I forgot to tell you, and maybe somebody from Swan District's here. They want to run all their ladies' games on which day? Saturday. They want to have colts, reserves, ladies and men all on the Saturday, and they are negotiating with the women's waffle now to do that. Why? Because their resources, they don't want to put them out 2 days in a row. They want to put them out for 1. That report never mentioned the Swan District's football club, and they never even got a letter. And that I'll finalise on, Madam Chair. I understand that guys of my age who have been around a very long time, we pick up a lot of stuff. You don't send letters out to get a reaction, because anybody who's worked in local government any length of time knows if you put a letter out and you get a response, it'll be between 7 and 12%. And you can go to any local authority you like, they'll tell you the same thing. And what did you get? 8.9%? 9%? Right in the ballpark. So don't assume the other 91% didn't have it. Half of them I spoke to didn't understand what you were talking about, and that's why you bring people to a meeting and explain it to them. And it's interesting, you want comments back on your town centre. And we've got a Saturday meeting, haven't we? To invite people in so they can come and talk to you. And that's how you run local government. Not with letters, but with face-to-face with your residents and listen to what they say. Madam Chair, I'm happy to leave it at that. Let the others here tonight, they can ask me questions if they want. If they want to make their own statements on the whole issue, that's fine. If they vote for the report, I'm not going to worry because I'm going to walk out the door and go back to 5 Devon Road. If they're not happy with the report, they need to give the council clear direction tonight. And may I say, if we pass resolutions here tonight, they are not binding on council. The council doesn't have to take them. What we're doing is giving the council an indication of what the people in these streets want. Now, if you look at safety, there was
Mr.
one thing.
Blanchard, are you going to continue because
Just
we can extend?
two seconds. Devon, North Road's got a back-to-back S-band, and one of the residents there said to me, "Look, can you bring it up that that's a danger?" And I went, "Yeah, I suppose it is."
So just before we give people a chance to ask some questions, just want to reiterate that you mentioned people might vote to, I forget the word you used, to endorse the report. Just want to remind people, when it came to council, council has not adopted this. We have asked for it to go away to get further input so that it can be refined to better reflect what the community is requesting. So just to clarify that point. Now, did you have a question for Mr. Blanchard?
I did. Going on from that, and thank you for your presentation.
That's all right.
Okay. The report came in June.
Yes.
And I'm sure you're aware that the recommendations, the council did not accept those recommendations, and in fact the councillors around the table unanimously supported my alternative to defer the item and for the officers to actually explore multiple other options and to bring that report back within 6 months. So that's the status as far as I know, and you're aware of that, aren't you?
Yes,
Yeah,
it's in
okay.
my report. What I can say, if I may, Madam Chair, the business of the school parking, and when you read the report, it's quite clear, it's for football parking, and I get what you people have done, and I spoke to the Mayor about chicanes. I mean, it was my boss and I at the City of Bayswater in 1986 who brought them into this state, so we know what chicanes are and how they work and how far apart they've got to be. But what I looked at is the football parking and the yellow signs that were going to be put out on residents. Now, if you look at all the facts, and as I said, I will give this report in the next couple of days to the administration. They can rip it to bits, they can do what they like with it. But there is stuff that I went onto the net and got off that they can go in and check. You can check all the accidents. I was on about those parking restrictions being overzealous and extended to a point that was no longer required. I can say to you in Devon Road, we're going to ban parking every weekend. Why? In the middle of summer when cricket and tennis is on, there's nobody on the oval here, so why have we got a parking restriction? There's something not right, councillor. Sorry.
That's another question.
So I think, just to explain, the gist of my alternative was to request the administration to look at more specifically at certain areas to actually create street amenity. Like I would agree that North Road differs from Devon Road and Devon Road differs from Briggs Street. There are differences in those streets. Would you agree with that? In their amenity and their volume of traffic. There's a difference in them.
If you talk volume of traffic, yes. If you talk amenity with residential houses against them, the amenity's pretty much the same. And I mean, those of you that have been around a long time, if you look at North Road, and I'm not suggesting this for 1 minute, there must be, a 50-metre road reserve. You're supposed to, in theory, have a dual carriageway up there. We're not going to do that, we're not even thinking about that. But the streets are residential streets. I asked for a copy of the town's road hierarchy because my personal opinion is, you're right, North Road is a local distributor, it's not an access road. West Road is a local distributor, not an access road. But hey, the officers told me Main Road said they're all access roads. Okay, I'm happy with that.
I think the point I'm trying to get at is that the council in June did not endorse the
No, no.
report. So just correct me if I'm wrong, because the presentation seems to assume that this report from June is going to be the methodology. And I'm saying that given that we have said to the staff to examine alternatives, my expectation is that there will be a variety of different alternatives that come back to council. So I would hope that you take that on board in good faith, that is what the intent of the alternative motion was. The intent was to ask the staff to explore different options, and I am hopeful that, and I think that will happen, and I would hope that you take that on board as being the intent.
Yeah. No, this meeting, and Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm debating from here. This meeting was for the residents to say to council, please, and I use the term please, do not enforce or make amendments to the current parking restrictions. Now that's when your report comes up. I get that, I don't have a problem with that. But I wanted the residents who were out there saying to me, mate, what's going on, to have their chance. If the residents don't turn up tonight and somebody says to me, what's going on, I say, mate, you weren't at the meeting, sorry. Because they've had their chance.
All right, so
But,
maybe
Madam Chair, can I make a point? One of the alternatives there, and somebody needs to check this out. Go to the Man's Marina, where you buy $2.5 to $3 million units, and you get one parking bay. And you know what they're planning? And one of your things was, can you look at alternative sites? They've got one coming. Multi-storey car parking, 500 metres away from people's units. In climate change, cold and heat, you're going to park your car and walk home?
I don't think that's planned.
thanks, Mr. Blanchard.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we might do is we'll move on to statements. So this is the opportunity for anybody else in the room who would like to make a statement on the topic of parking around the Oval for football and special events to have that opportunity. So if that is you, what I'd ask you to do is to raise your hand, and then when you're called, if you could come to the microphone and just state your name and your address. And each person has 2 minutes to make their statement. If you require longer, then the others in the room can move to extend that. But if there's anybody who'd like to make a statement now, keep in mind that the next thing on the agenda after this is questions. So if it's just a question that you have, maybe just hold on to that until we get to that point in the agenda. Is there any statements at this point? Yes, please.
I'm sorry, I think you were first.
That's all right, you can go first.
I'll jump up there. I was under a total misconception because I thought it was the residents that were making the fuss and not, I thought it was wrong. Anyway, I'll just say this. I lived in Bayswater and Devon Road, or Bayswater and Bassendean most of my life. And I came to the football. The Oval, it's points really. The Oval's been in Bassendean since 1929 and always used for football. The football season is short, with waffle games and roughly 16 in a season, with less spectators since AFL became the major competitor. And it's a credit to Swan Districts that they attract good crowds and bring revenue and life into the community, into the town. If you move into Bassendean to build or buy, this is where I thought it was the other way around. It's your responsibility to inform yourself of what happens in the town and what the conditions are, because I fully approve of the football. And I have parking. I'm a Devon Road resident and I'm on the corner of West Road, so I get plenty of parking from football and school, and on my verge sometimes. So I just want to say that I think that I used to come to the football as a child and young adult, and the parking today is minimal compared to what it was like before the AFL. And I think I'm sorry about this, I think I thought it was a complaint. I thought the complaint was ridiculous. So I actually approve of the parking being there. I'm sorry if it disagrees with people, but I've been a resident for a long time, and I think if you bring people in and you improve the economy, sporting is a great thing for young people rather than TV, and I'm in favour of not doing too much, to be honest, so thank you.
Thank you. And you're Mrs.
Oh,
Jan
sorry,
Matthews
I'm
at
Mrs.
50
Jan
Devon Road,
Matthews
is
at
that
50
correct?
Devon Road,
Thank
yes.
you.
And yes.
Yes, I believe you're next.
I just have to apologise first. I didn't actually prepare share anything because this was a very late notice.
Oh, that's fine.
My name's Irina. I live on 111 Old Perth Road, and I appreciate the last two residents that have spoken reside on Devon Road, where I believe not too much parking happens whilst the football is on. I'm not against the football. I'm not against special events. I encourage that, you know, our small businesses, you know, that we drive the economy and that, you know, we support our local. But as someone who has lived on that street, well, on the corner of Rosetta and Old Perth Road for the last 6 years, we've had 2 trees damaged from spectators who attend the football. We've had individuals abuse us. We've had people jump our fence. We used to maintain verge. However, because we do get spectators coming when I guess the grass is fruitful, we don't mow our lawns. So you probably walked past our house and thought, oh god, these people don't know how to like maintain their verge, but we just don't do it because the grass just gets flattened and there's no point. But I encourage, I guess, the suggestion as such, because I understand there's no decisions that have been made around it with the with the yellow lines. Rosetta Street, I believe, is one of the tightest streets we have in Bassendean, and when football is at full throttle, to get your car in and out, and particularly I have a small child, it is very difficult to reverse your vehicle, kind of, I guess, negotiate your way around those who park on the verge, who park on the opposite side, and get out of the street safely. So I'm someone who sees it every time there is football on, that people just have a blatant disrespect to any of the signs. There is a sign right on the verge that says no parking, and people ignore it. So I definitely for those yellow lines to be placed, particularly on Rosetta Street.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Irene, do you mind giving us your surname for the minutes?
Wilcox, W-I-L-L-C-O-X. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jane Dundas. I'm at number 13 Brigg Street, so next street down from Rosetta. So I'm at the very lucky residence which has Miss Mason, I'm forgetting what it's called. Oh goodness me. Emergency services uses this out the front with the water. Oh my gosh, this is really, really pathetic of me. I've lost my English language today. It's a hydrant. Thank you. It's going once, twice. I have a hydrant on my front verge. It's in the middle of the front verge. I used to also have a conflicting, no standing sign during football season. I think is what it used to say at one point, and another point it said between March and September. Yeah. And I've got to say when I first moved into the place, which is going back around about 10 years ago, there were probably a lot more cars around than there are now when it comes to street parking for the football along Brigg Street during football season. It's honestly, it's died off to a really large extent when it's come to Brigg Street. But I do recall 10 years back that when emergency services had to use the fire hydrant out the front of my place during the football, it clogged up the entire street and no one was able to get through. That was a point I wanted to raise. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Get this thing to work. Talk loud enough. Oh, Paul Polifka again, 193 West Road. I just want to talk about the consultation that occurred in relation to this particular item. So thank you for hyperlinking the agenda for this evening to the agenda for June, so that was quite useful to see what comments were made there. And so what had occurred there in terms of the documentation that was put to council, I think rightly so, is that whilst there are a number of responses, that had been filtered to responses from residents of the particular streets which were affected. Now, I'm not going to read through it chapter and verse because there's quite a few streets which are affected, Just to take those from the top, so I'm not cherry picking here, we're just reading down 1 through 3. It's got Briggs Street. So the proposed restriction is no stopping. Now, in terms of the residents' responses, yes, nil responses, no, 2 responses. Brook Street, again, no stopping. Yes, 2 responses, no, nil responses. And then finally, Calman Street, which has, again, no stopping, 0 responses from anyone. So it's not, doesn't appear on the material that was before council to be something which people were prepared to die in a ditch about, and it doesn't seem to be something which would prompt the kind of response which has been made by council. And the point that I make to that is that, well, if safety is the key consideration, that's non-negotiable. I mean, you wouldn't seek consultation from residents. And if there's a safety issue, you address it. That's not a matter that you can deal with by consensus. So I'm just foreshadowing a question which I will seek to ask through the chair in relation to the purpose of the consultation, if safety was a decisive issue in what was proposed to council. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll wait till we get to questions and we can bring that up. Thank you. Any other statements? Yes.
Sorry, Lauren Aiken from 7 Road Slasher Street, and I'm sorry I've never met you before,
okay.
but I've lived there for a couple of years, and I'd just really like to echo the sentiments of this lady over here. We came to Bassendean a long time ago because of the opportunities that it offers for the community. We also have 2 young children, and actually I don't share your views in terms of safety. I actually view that the car parking on our street that we are allowed in terms of on one side of the road at the moment actually offers our kids the opportunity to play on the street and be much more active in the public realm as a result of that, because it does slow traffic down and it does I guess offer that other alternative obstruction, slows people down on the street, makes them take more care. Certainly don't support, I think, the original motion which was banning cars parking on the street at all times. I would agree that it is an excessive response to the issue at hand.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Yates.
Thank you. Good evening all. Don Yates, 10 Thompson Road, Success Hill. Resident of about 25 years, double jab. All right, now I forgive. Thompson Road is a kiss and ride street for Success Hill Todd. And over the years, I guess in the morning and the afternoon, particularly during the week, it's a drop-off point where people come up the street, drop off the people, then disappear again. Now, some people have to wait for the train, it might be a few minutes or whatever. So if we have this arbitrary yellow paint lines everywhere, then those people, while they're waiting for the train to appear, are actually going to be parking illegally. I'm not saying the rangers would go out there and just issue tickets for the sake of generating revenue, but I think there needs to be care in the whole yellow line strategy as such. What also happens is that people do park in the street, which are like a natural chicane, and people have to slow up a bit to actually get to the end of Thompson Road to wait for the train, drop people off for the train. So just flooding the town with yellow lines, I think would be disappointing. I guess the other aspect to it, there are other aspects where, if you take the corner of Nurstead Avenue and Thompson Road, if you were to add white lines for the corner, that in itself would add to the safety. Not yellow lines just to restrict the parking, but white lines in the middle of the road to actually guide people when they're actually cutting corners and aspects like that, because a number of the residents are just waiting for the head-on collision at that particular intersection, again because of a lack of white dotted lines down the middle of the road. Other than that, yes, we have CCTV that looks at the intersection, looks at the Thompson Road. Yes, we get concerned when kids roar up the street with their V8s and the utes and whatever and drop people off, but in the 25 years there hasn't been a serious prank. I guess the other joke is we have a no parking sign opposite us in the east side of Thompson Road, and it says no parking for football days, Saturdays between 8 and 6 p.m, between March and August. The biggest parking that we ever had in the street was on a Sunday in September. So the signs meant absolutely nothing. So a bit of imagination and a bit of astuteness when it comes to the signage would be good. But I think you can leave the yellow lines back in the tin. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Yates. And just on that point, that would be one of the reasons why the staff undertook an audit of the signage, because there were identified issues like that did need to be addressed. I'm going to move on to somebody else if they'd like to make a statement at this point. Is there anybody else that would like to? Yes, Mr. Dennis.
Jeff Dennis from 140 Old Perth Road, Swan District Football Club. Just a statement that we continue to be disappointed at the lack of engagement with our football club. This is clearly an issue that's centred around the football club, yet no one from Town of Bassendean has reached out to us, whether verbally, in writing, or any form, which seems to be the status quo. It seems to be exactly what happens to just about everything. We are just left isolated, and we get a feeling that the town and the council just do not want our football club being in the town of Bassendean.
I'd just like to respond to that. It may be the case that the club, I'm not sure, I wasn't involved in the consultation, but I don't think it is a true reflection of the consultation with the club. For example, the current town centre master planning process, the club was engaged the whole way through the process and had a lot of one-on-one meetings, not only with the town staff, but also with creating communities who've been conducting the consultation for us. So I completely agree that it's essential that the town and the club work together in partnership if we're going to get good outcomes for our community, but I don't think it's a fair reflection to say that it's the standard procedure.
Can I respond to that?
No, you cannot.
Correct.
All right. Can we please move on to the next item now, if there's no further statements, which is questions. So again, if you have a question that relates specifically to tonight's topic, you're very welcome to ask it. Same process again, if you could raise your hand, we'll ask you one at a time to come to the microphone. Yes.
So hi, I'm back again, and hopefully I've got my English together with me. So my question being, was the idea of the planning with this at all associated with the proposed master plan that came out, and the associated loss of the Swan District football oval parking and
Okay, so your question is around the motivation for undertaking the audit of the parking. Okay, so I'm not sure if that be you, Mr. Gibson, who'd be best placed to respond to that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, they're largely discrete bodies of work. Even if there had been no town centre master plan underway, this review would have been undertaken. It's obviously good practice to review and audit the parking restrictions from time to time. So whilst they relate to nearby areas, and in some cases the same area, some areas, they're largely separate bodies of work, and it's just a coincidence they were happening at about the same time.
Yes.
Do I go back up?
Yeah, that'd be great. It just then it gets recorded on
okay.
the audio.
This is based on the questions. This is the first time I've been notified as a resident that there was an audit being undertaken. I'm just curious because there seems to be a lot of residents that are not pro, I guess, the suggested way forward. What was the level of consultation that went around? Because having the discussion with my neighbours, they weren't aware that any of these discussions or an audit was being undertaken.
Are you able to outline the process the staff went through?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the consultation was undertaken in March this year with the affected owners and occupiers. I think there was 377 surveys distributed. Happy to check the merge data to make sure that your property was included in that. But there was also a secondary round of consultation specific for Devon Road. As the gentleman suggested earlier, there was not a great deal of feeling one way or another for most of these streets, with the exception of Devon Road, which generated 3 comments for and 7 against. On the back of that response, we undertook a second round of consultation before bringing the report to Council in June.
And just to clarify, that second round of consultation involves meeting with residents on the street where staff are present.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So staff were present on the street taking,
Oh, to answer residents' questions and to take feedback from people.
and when did that occur?
Have you got the date? This was just for Devon Road. After
Oh,
the
okay, just for Devon
responses
Road.
were, there was quite mixed responses, so
Okay.
to try and get a bit more of an understanding of what the overall feel from residents of that particular street was.
Okay, so do we know what the response was for those residents on Rosetta Street? I understand that, you know, you guys are okay with the parking situation at present, but in terms of
Yep,
Rosetta Street, Old Perth Road.
Yep, so
to-
Rosetta Street, the existing restriction is no parking Saturdays, March to August.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So the proposed restriction was no stopping with a yellow edge line,
Mhm.
including the cul-de-sac and the entrance and exit.
Yeah.
And the yes for that was a 9 and the no was a 4.
Okay, so pro the yellow line.
Yes.
Okay. So that yellow line is just going on
On the bitumen, on the side of the road.
as
So,
you enter Rosetta Street. Is that correct?
on the east side, so as you were entering off Old Perth Road on
Yeah.
the left, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, because currently you're okay to park on
Yeah,
the.
so it would just be replacing the existing signage that's
Yeah.
on that side at the moment. That's what the proposal was, is that correct?
Yes, Madam Mayor, that's correct. I'll just clarify your previous comment.
Sorry.
There were 2 tables in the report to council. One was just the raw data and one distilled it down by
Thank you.
submissions from those in the street. So on the raw data, it was 9 in favour and 4 against. On the location-specific responses, it was 3 each.
Okay. Just for me, those numbers don't necessarily add up in terms of if the majority of the residents were afforded the opportunity to respond or provide, I guess, their feedback on suggested ways forward of resolving some of the parking issues. If residents were afforded the opportunity to respond, those numbers don't equal up. That you've got, say, 4 residents saying pro and 3 residents saying against. There's significantly more residents within those affected areas that may have, like myself, because I don't recall any correspondence, no members of the council, I guess, making contact with myself around the proposed changes to parking. So I'm just saying, whilst your numbers reflect that certain residents have provided their feedback around proposed ways forward, I'm saying I've never been approached by any member of the council around any of those proposed changes. I only found out about this, a meeting, because I had I had contacted one of the rangers during a game because I was blocked in by, I guess, spectators from the football, and that's in no means, disregarding, I guess, the people coming into the town. And for me, I would say encourage spectators to take public transport, because the sentiment about global change and everything else, you shouldn't, be encouraging people driving their vehicles anyway. So that's how I found about it this evening. So
we'll definitely check that you're on the database,
Yeah.
but take your point about, because clearly there's more people on the street than
Yeah.
responded. It may be that people received things and chose not to respond.
exactly,
or,
yeah, and I appreciate that. That
yeah.
may have been what has occurred, but in terms of
But there are other opportunities for engagement that the town
Yeah.
may choose to explore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Thanks. Questions? Mr. Blanchard and then Mr. Pliquot.
Terry Blanchard, 5 Devon Road. Does the staff have any evidence that by painting yellow lines on a road with words works better than having appropriate signs?
Through you, Madam Mayor, not right now, no. Happy to receive any information you may have though.
The other thing, Madam Mayor, is I'd ask that when people are talking about access from properties, that they say which street their property actually accesses. Because I've got a feeling a couple of them are to do with Old Perth Road, which is not part of this scheme.
Yes, again, Paul Blifka, 93 West Road. So this question I'll direct through you, Madam Mayor, to Director Gibson. So just in terms of the context, so the preamble to the proposal from administration at the council
Are
meeting.
you able to speak up just a little?
Yeah, not a problem.
Yeah.
So the preamble from the council meeting of the June council meeting states that the information taken into account during the audit included anecdotal history from ranger services, site inspections and complaints, comments and requests received from the community. So I'm trying to work out the impetus for this. And my first question is, was safety a driver for this audit?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd say it wasn't a particular driver for it. There wasn't any significant concerns. It was obviously a consideration that if we were going to be changing the status quo, we wouldn't want to be compromising safety at all, but there wasn't any major underlying concerns about the existing safety of the signs. Obviously there was general considerations about amenity, visual clutter associated with the signage as opposed to the vehicles, whether the signage is easy to understand and interpret and indeed see, what would best serve the drivers of the vehicles looking to park as well as the neighbours who live on the roads where the parking is occurring.
And so the second question there, so all things being equal, the community consultation was critical to a decision in that, as you said, we wanted to perhaps maintain the status quo unless there was a clear indication from the community that they wished to depart from that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, broadly that's correct. I suppose that would be evidenced by the fact that whilst for all but one of the proposals there was little feedback, there wasn't an obvious preference either way. For the single one where there did seem to be a bit more of an opinion in the community, we actually reconsulted. So yes, going to the question is that the public consultation was an important informing piece for council.
Thank you, Director.
Any further questions? Okay, so if there's no further questions, what we'll move on to now. Was there another question, Mr. Blanchard?
No.
I thought you put your hand up, my apologies. So we'll move on to item 7. So this is where there's the opportunity for electors to propose motions to the room. So the way that this works is anybody is welcome to propose a motion. The motion would need to be seconded for it to be debated, and then it would go to the vote for the electors in the room. You're not obligated to vote, but you vote by a show of hands. And then any motions that were passed tonight would be considered by council at the next council meeting. As Mr. Blanchard indicated earlier, council's not bound to adopt the resolutions that are made tonight, but it's definitely something that would be taken into consideration when decisions on this matter are made when the report comes back to council in a few months' time. So that's you now, Mr. Blanchard. It's because your hand is behind the chair. I can't quite see who it's attached to.
All right.
Did you want to come up to the microphone, please?
Yeah, I will if I can. With your indulgence, I'd like to ask the lady here. You want the yellow lines put into Rosetta?
And just to clarify, my right of entry is on Rosetta Street.
It's
so
on
whilst you intimate that where my house or my address, my residential address may not be included in these proposed changes, my right of entry and my driveway is on Rosetta Street. And
So
I'm
you didn't get the letters?
No, I didn't.
So just to clarify, you are in favour, what you're saying is you're in favour of the current officer recommendation that was included in the report. So to have the
I
yellow
haven't read
lines.
the report,
Okay.
so what I'm saying I am in favour of is the proposed yellow line
Yeah. That's what's included in the
Yes.
report. Yep.
on Rosetta Street.
Well, Madam Chair, I'm quite happy to amend the resolution I was going to put out and exclude Rosetta from what I'm about to propose. I'm saying we, the electors attending the special electors meeting on the 31st of August 2021. I'm sorry, this is a...
Do you have a
Very
copy
verbal.
of this for our minute taker, Mr. Blanchard?
No, I'll give these, I don't have a problem. Request council not to make any changes or amendments to the existing parking restrictions in the streets detailed in the report 12.6 put to council on the 22nd of June, excluding Rosetta Street, so that the residents there can talk with the officers, and that's the first one. I've got three, but
Okay, hold on, let's just deal with one at a time then, okay? So,
I better do that.
Ms Holmes, are you comfortable to get that from Mr Blanchard later?
Yeah.
Okay, so is everybody clear on what the proposal is? Okay, so you're saying basically leave things as they are with the signage that is currently there, except for Rosetta Street?
Yep.
Okay, so that's been moved by Mr Blanchard. Is there someone who'd be willing to second that motion? Yep. Okay, is there anybody against the motion? Okay, so did you want to speak to it, Mr Blanchard?
Just very quick, I don't keep people, I like to go to bed too. Look, the idea of the meeting tonight, and as I said, it's not binding on council, but there are councillors here, there are officers here, and the feeling of the meeting, the minutes of this meeting under the Act have got to go to the next ordinary council meeting, which is the end of September. But it gives the council an opportunity to hear what the residents are saying. If everybody, and I said at the start, if all you people here say, we want yellow lines, let's vote. But if you don't, you've had a chance to have a say, because and there was a lady from Brigg Street, I spoke to 3 of your residents in there, and they said the yellow line is only for the football. I said, no, it's not. It's 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. It's an overkill. It's just not on. And there are reasons why you don't do it. So, Madam Mayor, I just putting to the meeting, if they're willing to carry it, to say to council, please, when you get the report in 6 months' time, don't make changes to the existing parking restrictions that we already have that are servicing us well, except you can talk to Rosetta Street. That's what it's about.
Did you wish to speak to the motion? No? Is there anybody that would like to speak against the motion? Okay, so then we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of supporting the motion? So that is carried. And another motion, Mr Blanchard?
This actually goes back to the heart of what I believed, and I'm not going to get into our telephone conversation the first day. It's the process of how we get information out of our residents. And it's a bit long and verbose, and if people want to amend it, that's fine. But I'm saying the same thing, we're the electors at the special meeting of the 31st to request that if problems arise with the existing parking restrictions in the streets detailed on the report 12.6 put to council 22nd of June, the appropriate director and not his staff form a working group with resident representatives from the affected streets, where that group may look at the problems, discuss with the director the solutions, take those solutions back to the residents and formulate a parking plan that can then be put to council with the support not only of the officers and the director, but also with the residents already having said, hey, we're happy with this, please pass it. Because normally you don't get parking restrictions in the street.
Okay, let's just hold on a second. Have you got something? Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Alright, so before we debate, is there anybody who'd be willing to second Mr Blanchard's motion?
That's conditional. I do want to hear what the governance officer
I think he's going to provide it in writing. Do you want to read out what you've currently got for us?
I have put that the electors request that if problems arise with the existing parking restrictions, the appropriate director will form a working group with the residents of the affected streets to discuss and consider solutions to that.
Is that your motion, Mr Blanchard? You happy with that? You comfortable, Mr Palikwa?
I'd just like to know from the Director of Governance whether that's essentially council or the electors informing administration what they have to do, and whether there's any concern that that might be overstepping
Yeah, so
the mark.
council can only instruct the CEO, and then the CEO makes the decisions about how the staff's resources are allocated and the process that is undertaken. Did you wish to comment at all?
No, I think it was
I'll second it, then move that amendment to make it that the CEO is being directed to do so.
You happy with the amendment, Mr Blanchard?
Yep.
So for everybody else in the room, essentially it's the same motion, just with, instead of the director being specifically mentioned, that the task is given to the CEO and she would delegate as appropriate.
Yes.
Okay, so Mr Blanchard has moved. Were you seconding, Mr Palika, with the amendment you said?
Yeah,
happy
to.
Okay. Are you against or are you speaking? Unless anybody wishes to speak to that, I'll put it to the vote. So all those in favour? Okay, so that is carried. Now, did you have something you wanted to put forward? Yes.
So again, Lauren Aiken from Risotto Street, just acknowledging the, I guess the concerns of Arena down the road. I'd just maybe put forward the motion that the intersections versus the mid-block links be considered in a different way, potentially by council moving forward.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Not loud enough. So just basically suggesting that in future analysis of the parking requirements, that the intersections versus the mid-block links be considered in a different way, potentially in terms of the parking restrictions.
So did you want that as an actual motion or just something for the staff to note in the minutes for consideration when they're preparing the future report?
Move it and we'll second it.
Okay, so you, Amy, do you have something there you'd be able to read back when you're ready?
She wants to make the intersection.
Just hold on a second, Will.
And the mid-block another. I don't have a problem with that.
So in future analysis, the intersections versus the mid-block links, is that what you said? Be considered separately? Potentially separately in terms of the restrictions that are required.
Yep.
In terms of the restrictions that are required.
Okay, so we've got a mover. Are you seconding that,
Yes.
Mr Blanchard? Okay, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That is carried. Thank you. And did you have another one, Mr Blanchard?
No, Madam Chair, I'll let the third one go.
Is there anybody else who would like to move a motion? Yes, Mr Busby.
Mr Busby, 53 Hague Street, Ashfield. Can I speak on traffic safety now?
No, hold on. We're at motions at the moment. Do you have a motion you want to put forward?
No, but I want to speak on safety, on traffic.
In this particular location in relation to parking?
Yes.
So are you asking a question? I'm not sure what you're trying to do at this point.
I'm asking a question if I can.
Okay, I'll allow you to ask a question now. You should have really asked it back at question time, but I'll let you ask this one question now.
With the parking on a Saturday morning, the Christian Association on Guildford Road park maybe 100 cars on Guildford Road, just one off.
You're talking at Ashfield Reserve.
Yes, because we're talking safety with parking.
No, we're talking about parking restriction around the oval for the football and special events
So we're just sticking
specifically.
with that. All right,
Yeah.
that's fine.
But Mr Busby, if you've got a question specifically, please feel free to send one of the staff or myself an email. I'm happy to follow up on it for you. Okay, so no further motions at this point? Okay, so we've had 3, I believe, carried tonight, so they'll be included in an upcoming council agenda. And the staff in the interim, well not in the interim, over the next few months will be preparing another report to council on this particular topic. So I'm not sure how that's going to be communicated, but look out for that as well. Thank you everybody for your attendance here this evening. Really appreciate you giving up your evening. I know your time is precious and there's probably lots of other things you'd like to be spending your evening doing. Mr Blanchard?
Yeah, I just want to ask you a question. The minutes that you take tonight
Yes,
go through as the minutes of this special electors meeting,
that's correct.
and the report that goes up that takes them up, the officers can have comment in, but the comments they've made within the meeting are the only comments that you can put in the minutes. You